Imagine waking up one morning, looking in the mirror, and not recognizing the person staring back. Not because your face changed, but because the light behind your eyes had gone out. You see the same face, but the person underneath, the one who used to laugh too loudly and dream too boldly, feels like a stranger. That was me on my 35th birthday, standing in a cramped apartment, staring at a life that felt less like living and more like slow erosion. My phone buzzed with a meeting reminder, and I heard it for the first time. A whisper from deep in my chest. Is this it? For years, I told myself that whisper was just fear. I believed this was what adult life was supposed to be. Dreams for stability, passion for a paycheck, joy for a predictable life that didn't scare me. I had a routine you could set a clock by. Wake up, coffee, commute, work, lunch, at my desk, commute, dinner, television, sleep, repeat. I built a life so safe there was no room for disappointment. But a life without disappointment is also a life without anything magnificent. The lesson began on an ordinary Tuesday. I was staring at a spreadsheet when a notification appeared. An obituary. Someone I knew had passed away. He was my age, the one always laughing, always planning his next adventure, always saying life is too short to play it safe. Reduced to a paragraph on a website. The whisper came back louder. Is this how your story ends? That night, I lay in bed, listing my fears, quitting my job, running out of money, what my parents would say, failing so publicly I could never recover. Then another thought surfaced. I was afraid of regret, terrified of being 80, looking back at a life lived in gray, wondering what would have happened if I'd just had the courage to try. That fear was bigger than all the others. The next morning, I reached for a notebook. I wrote one sentence. What would I do if I knew I could not fail? The answer came quietly. I would write, not spreadsheets, stories. The stories living in my head for over a decade. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I didn't quit my job the next day. Real life is messier. I started waking up an hour earlier. I wrote every morning before the world woke up. The first days were brutal. The words were stiff. The critic in my head was merciless. Who do you think you are? But I kept showing up. 1 hour. Every day. A month passed. Then 2. My writing was becoming mine. It was the only time I felt like I was breathing. The contrast became unbearable. Sitting in my gray cubicle felt like a betrayal of the worlds I was building. The whisper changed. You don't belong here anymore. The breaking point came during a performance review. My boss smiled. You're reliable, consistent. You never cause waves. He offered me a small raise. Something inside me snapped. Not in anger, in clarity. I walked back, opened a blank document. and wrote my resignation letter. I had 6 months of savings, a half-finished manuscript, and a heart full of terror. My father's silence on the phone was deafening. "You're throwing away your security." My mother was direct. "For a hobby? You're too old for this." I was alone. I had cut the rope, and I was in free fall. The first 3 months were the darkest. The fear came back 10 times stronger. "You're a fraud. You're gonna lose everything." I watched my savings dwindle. Then came the day I hit bottom. Another rejection email from a literary agent. I had sent dozens. All came back the same. I had enough money for 1 more month. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer. There it was, the guitar I hadn't touched in over a decade. Dusty, a relic of who I used to be. I sat on the worn-out couch and held it. I didn't play. I just held it. And I cried. Deep, heaving sobs from a place I'd been ignoring for years. The sound of a man mourning the years he lost to fear. I cried until I had nothing left. In the silence, exhausted and empty, I heard the voice again. Quiet, calm, my own. "You're not writing for an agent. You're not writing for your parents. You started because you had to. Remember why." I went back to my desk. I deleted every agent email. I read my story, not as a job application, but as a reader. For the first time, I saw it. Beneath the flaws, I saw the heart. A story about a person afraid to live, who had to lose everything to find out what living meant. It was my story. I stopped sending queries. I rewrote the manuscript from scratch. I poured the fear, the loneliness, the desperation, and the tiny, stubborn flicker of hope onto the page. I finished on a Thursday. I printed it out and held it. It was real. It was mine. I decided to publish it myself, not because I thought it would be a bestseller, but because I needed to finish what I started. I needed to put it out into the world, even if no one read it. I made 1,000 mistakes, but every mistake felt like a step forward, because I was moving. The day I hit publish, I let out a breath I'd been holding for 15 years. I made one post. I was afraid for a long time. I built a life to avoid disappointment. Today, I'm releasing a book I wrote in the cracks of that life. I don't know if anyone will read it, but I wrote it. And that's everything. Something unexpected happened. A few people read it. Then more. They left reviews. Raw, honest words. This story made me feel less alone. I saw myself in this character. Messages started flowing. People living in their own gray cubicles said my story gave them courage to start, to try, to have the difficult conversation. My failure had become a lifeline. The book didn't make me a millionaire, but it found its people. And in finding them, I found my purpose, the lesson I had to learn in the darkness. The lesson is this: the opposite of a happy life isn't a sad life. The opposite of a happy life is a safe life. A safe life will rob you of everything you are: piece by piece until you're just a shell. The voice that whispers, "What if you fail?" is not your enemy. The real enemy is the voice that says, "Don't even try." I still have mornings where the words don't come. I still have moments where the fear creeps back. But now I know how to answer. I open my notebook and write one sentence. What would I do if I knew I could not fail? And then I start. Fear doesn't leave. You just learn to move with it. The man I was on my 35th birthday is gone. And his place is someone who knows the life you're afraid to live is the only one worth having. The story you're afraid to tell is the one the world is waiting to hear. The leap you're terrified to take is the one that teaches you to fly. I'm not telling you to quit your job tomorrow. I'm talking about the small, terrifying act of choosing yourself. Waking up an hour earlier, writing one page, making that one phone call, the tiny, consistent acts of courage that build a life you don't need to escape from. The happy ending isn't the book. It's the moment I sat on that couch holding a dusty guitar and cried. Because in that moment, I stopped running. I found myself, the person brave enough to be terrified, the person willing to lose it all for the chance to feel alive. So to you listening, know this. The thing you're most afraid of? That's not a weakness. That's a compass pointing you toward the life you're meant to live. The obstacle isn't the fear. The obstacle is believing you're the only one who feels it. You're not. The people you admire are just as terrified. The difference is they decided to take a step. They decided regret is worse than failure. Your story isn't over. This is the part where the main character, against all odds, chooses to fight for their own life. The voice you've been hearing. That's not static. That's a signal. Your signal. Telling you that you are capable of so much more. The walls you built weren't built to keep failure out. They were built to keep your magnificence in. It's time to start knocking them down, one brick at a time. Go. Write your page. Make your call. Take your step. Your future self isn't waiting for you to be ready. They're waiting for you to be brave. And when you finally meet them, looking in the mirror, the light will be back in your eyes. Because you'll know you didn't just survive, you lived. And that's the only story that ever really mattered. If this story touched something deep inside you, if it reminded you of a dream you buried long ago, then I want you to do one thing for me right now. Pause this video, close your eyes, and ask yourself that one question. What would I do if I knew I could not fail? Whatever answer comes, don't ignore it. Write it down. And tomorrow, take one small step toward it. Just one. And when you do, come back here and tell me in the comments, what is that one thing you're finally ready to start? I'll be waiting to read every single one. Because your story matters, and it's time you started living it. If you're ready to keep walking this path, to keep choosing courage over comfort, then subscribe to Silence Ascent. Because the quiet moments, they're where the strongest rises begin. Your story is far from over. Go. Write your page. Take your step. And remember, the voice you heard today, that wasn't static. That was your signal. Keep climbing. Keep rising. This is Silence Ascent.